Finance Committee of the 24th Navajo Nation Council Special Meeting, July 14, 2021. Jamie Hino, and your location, please.
Good morning, President. I'm at Raymond, New Mexico.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Hino. And your location, please.
Excuse me, Ramona, we're not hearing you.
Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., and your location, please.
President, Guns Rosa, New Mexico.
Okay, thank you. Jimmy Yellow here, and your location, please. Honorable Jimmy Yellow here, and your location, please.
You need to press *6 if you're muted.
Okay, and your location, please. Okay, and your location, please.
Delegate Yellowhairs on driving at Tahiti. Delegate Yellowhair for the record.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Jeremy Yellowhair is present. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, and your location, please.
I'm here. I'll be being Window Rock. Driving down there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay is present. Amber Kennesbach Crotty, and your location, please. Amber Kennesbach Crotty, and your location, please. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, and your location, please. Brown, and your location, please. Members present, 2 not entering upon roll call. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for that roll call. We do have a quorum. So we'll call this meeting to order. It is 10:16 a.m. And with that, we'll move forward with our agenda. And also invocation. This morning, it's the Sinata, Doggy Elmer P.
I'll today. I'll go ahead and do that. Good morning. Yat Epene. Tildo, Ado, Sitado, Ado, my sister, Doshi David, and the crowd. Ado, the Tildo, Nathaniel Brown, Ado, Shuna, Ado, Jimmy, Yellowhead, Ado, Sitosha, Peggy, Ado, David, Ramona. Money that is deep in the teacher. I don't give it that angle line though. But the same so arts and the about to go. I don't deep in the teacher. In Southeast. Yet he is she's not the head juice to be with today. So there's the to go. There's one of this one of son to come other homes to try yet the corner. You can do that and offend the county, the position the corner. In the Alpe, and the corner, and the corner equal. Yabbies in the Alpe, in the corner. Or 60 artists. I don't some all fourth and soon to be yours towards the Cody in no. Nita, but that's called the corner, the public dance. The dance team, the call top dance team, the game to corner. Because they are called no some cards, they come from another team, the corner. Other comes how they call the International and they don't the content the content the competent because they could because in the hot just now and the conference the content because in talk is not yet in the content aro konde hot adi konde ben na to kosigin de konde be ade set not sa to mesigi to ade be na to mesigi de konde aro konde be e kon non sab ka je kon non ka digin de ne ho don je konde aro konde aj kon ni ke de ne de konde ajo pa in de konde ado konde kon ba chon on dan sakit de konde هذا كون كاتو وسيم تكون ياد لكون كي هنا يا تكون كأدي بانيت إن تكون ده تدبر هنا تاني آن خادي ليش كأدي كون يسي بان سي كيس إن تكون ده نخيات إيتو ده هيجي آن تكون ده هذا شيء خاشين لا شيء بحث آن يكون بتخدد أو يعني شيء أروح بتخدد أو شيء داد ياتو يكون إبيك أحد يكون عشان صوت يكون لا يكون بين كده هاي جيش إن تكون بنبي تكون ده أتخش الخيات إيه دوت ليش ده مش إيه كده زين تكون ده إذا جبا إن زنيت أنا غاجيت يكون ده يكون بكاتو وسيت إن خادو ليش نخادي ليش تكون ده هذا ده يكون تاكس نهت تكون ده تاكس نهت أجين خبي ليش بك يكون ده ليش تكون ده هذا ده يكون جبا إن تكون ده بنبي تكون ده فهم ذات خالص شندني بيجي لكون هذا كون بكحد يكون أني تخو خانا هديان خانا جين باتو ده لكون ده لا هو يجي لكون ده أو يكره لكون هذا لكون ده يكون نقاشين ده يكره لكون إذا باه يجيدو ده نيجن لكون ده هذا كون ده يكون داجة هديين هذا آجة نتاها كيس نهات أصل داجة لكون ده كون ده يكون تسلات لا غير بكحجون تسلان لون بالتخش ده هديين بكحج ده هديين بيجي ده هديين عادت يكون بين تناني كيتودي ناني تأذى به نادي تس بس نادي نيدو دس فدا يكون هدي تس يكون ده عادت خندة الناس يكون ده نقدر لينج يكون ده بس لأن آج يكون ده عادت يكون ده يكون هذا هم يجيش يكون ده صدق سن ندات آج يكون ده يجي إنداد إيش يكون آج يكون بنيج نيدو دس عادت يكون بنيج وخزون دو دس نسوي يكون يكون نيج هدي تس عادت يكون وجون رو دسم سويا اشتكو وجون أصلي دودي وجون أصلي
كه ناشنا أنا شنو خاصين زنيجي كه أولياء دي لكذا بناتش يكون ده إيش كون يطلع لديش ده بناتش كل شيء بين بناتي ده شيء ده أنا شنو بس بين سند كهلا They're not sorry, for recognizing cancer visiting official. For the record, AA Kudosh and top budget finance committee members. AA has Nancy contact. Ado Benache Che. They'll get Odo so a call you earlier. I'm on the line now. How did you morning walk now? Kudosh Ado Suna. They'll get publication. It's notion of that delegate the vice chair cost later, Sean.
I'm here too.
Christine is not that. And okay, last door basement has onset that is any delegates there on the line right now. Okay. Although we do have our staff though with legislative branch. Ramona Nelson, Peggy Nakay with us here. Then I heard Donovan Hanley from the Speaker's office. Is there anybody else from the Speaker's office on the line with us? Okay, the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Laureline Tapahe with Office of Legislative Counsel. I believe Dana Bobroff will also be covering this meeting today as she is able.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being on the line with us. Do we have the Nomination Department of Justice on the line?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is Mel Rodas from the Tax and Finance Unit of DOJ, and my colleague, Ms. Lowell, is also on the line. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for being on the call. Do we have the Office of the President and Vice President on the line? The Office of the President and Vice President?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is Leonard Sosa with OPVP on the line. Thank you.
Good morning, Shnanta, for being on the call with us. Do we have the Office of Madam Chief Justice, Troy and Jane, on the line? Judicial Branch representatives? Okay, with that, moving forward, are there any program managers on the line from the executive branch?
Mr. Chair, this is Dominic Bial, OMB.
Good morning, Dominic. Thank you for being on the call. Office of the Controller? Is there a representative from the Navajo Nation Office of the Controller on the line? Okay, moving forward, are there any staff, Navajo Nation employees on the line with us today?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is J.T. Willie with Division of Economic Development.
Good morning, JT. Okay, let's move forward on our agenda here. We didn't adopt the agenda. Peggy, if you would read the proposed agenda into the record for us, please.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Budget and Finance. This is your proposed agenda for the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation Council, July 14, 2021 special meeting via teleconference. Presiding is Jamie Henry, Chairperson, Raymond Smith Jr., Vice Chairperson. Place is via teleconference, Window Rock, Navajo Nation. 1, call the meeting to order. The roll call, the invocation. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review and adopt the agenda. 4, review and adopt the journal. None. 5, receive reports. None. 6, old business. None. 7, new business. A, legislation number 0110-21 and action relating to budget and finance, Navigate committees in Navajo Nation Council. Establishing the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund and the expenditure authorization process thereunder, waiving certain provisions of the Navajo Nation Appropriations Act, amending 12 NNC Section 54 to authorize emergency procurements, authorizing reimbursement of the citizen fund and the undesignated unreserved fund balance, authorizing central support and regulatory costs funding, authorizing funding to complete defunded Navajo Nation CARES Fund expenditure plans, authorizing the establishment of a Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund office within the Office of the President and Vice President, sponsored by Carl Slater and Seth Damon Council delegates. The legislation number 0105-21, an action relating to the Resources and Development, Budget and Finance, and the Executive Committee and the Navajo Nation Council, appropriating $529,850 in citizen funds to the Commission on Navajo Government Development for the Nahata Hogan and Leadership Building, approving the Nahata Hogan and Leadership Building Expenditure Plan, pursuant to 12 NNC section 2501 through 2508. Sponsored by Jamie Henyo, Council Delegate. 8, close of the session and announcements. The next regular meeting is August 3rd, 2021. That's the reading of the agenda.
Thank you for that reading. The Budget and Finance Committee, is there a motion to accept the agenda as read?
Vice Chair Smith, motion.
Vice Chair Smith? Motion to
Delegate
accept
Brown,
the
I'll
agenda.
second.
And second by Delegate Nathaniel Brown. So we do have a motion and second on to accept the agenda. Is there any comments or questions, committee members? Yeah. There's no questions or comments.
This is Vice Chair Smith.
Vice Chair Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Henyo and committee members of the Budget and Finance Committee and those that are with us this morning, dignitaries and all the folks that are listening in. Yeah, Dapen. My question, Chair Henyo, is Controller. It's still getting a lot of calls from the CARES, and I'm just hoping that there'll be a hotline for the folks that are questioning, that need answers regarding the first phase. Although the second phase, I think that it gets to house a asna house a nasos ben ye a gachi jata no edo ahasunda ko that the controller that's just on judo with us even that she night this could do this and that I don't want to take up too much time, Joe. Dina, Nishaisi, Dan Heholo, and that, and so expenditure planning for the ARPA funds, Vice Chair Slater, legislation in Yagi. Okay, no, I just could do this, and I'm just hoping that the controller maybe can open up a hotline for these folks. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Smith. So, are you requesting for a report from the Controller's office today?
Oh, shouldn't that? I'll request a report after the legislations. Let's do the legislations first. I'll request for a report on this so we can get some answers on it. Okay, now.
So, would that be an amendment for now, or are you going to wait till after the legislation to suspend the floor rules?
Chair, this is if that's the case, I'll second to that motion.
Vice Chair, hold on, Vice Chair, Delegate Yellow here. Hold on. I have a clear answer from Vice Chair Smith. Vice Chair Smith, do you have the floor?
Oh, okay, not dash, I don't dash. I know you want to second this, but actually, the legislation became I'll suspend the floor rules on behalf of the report. But in Vidiega, you have controller OU. I just wanted to kind of give her a heads up. I'll call Vidiega. I'll go ahead and just suspend the floor rules afterwards. Thank you.
Gashina, thank you for that clarification, Vice Chair Smith. So, Shnanda, Delegate Yellow here. At the end of the legislation, the motion so you can second it at that time.
I'm sorry.
Peggy, if you would contact the controller's office, let them know to be on the line. During the roll call, they did not respond. So, if you would just send them a message, let them know that there will be a report requested from them after legislations are completed. with this, Shananda, Budget and Finance Committee members, is there any other comments or questions?
Chair, this is Delegate Yellow here.
Shananda, do you have the floor?
I have some announcement too, but maybe after agenda, I'd like to
Shananda, Delegate Yellow Hair, on their agenda, it says written announcements. You can write out your announcment to email and send it to Peggy, and then she could send it to all the committee members. On the agenda, there's a format that was changed by law. Instead of regular announcements, now it's written announcements.
Okay, thank you.
Kashina, so write it out, send it to Peggy, and she'll send it to committee members. Are there any further questions or comments regarding the proposed agenda? Tanoia, call for the question to accept the agenda as read. Ramona, leave us in a roll call vote.
Vote for approving the agenda. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Junior votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
I'll vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Amber Kennisbot Crotty, how do you vote? Kennisbot Crotty. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I'll vote green.
Begay votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing, chairman not voting, and 1 member not voting. Chairman?
Thank you for that roll call vote. Shananda, we have agenda before us. 4 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. With this, let's move forward to item 5, receiving reports. There's none. 6, old business. There is none. 7, new business. Legislation 0110-21. And we believe we do have our sponsor with us today, Shananda. Vice Chair Slater is here. He answered roll call. And with this, Peggy, if you would read the legislation into the record for us, please.
Members of the Budget and Finance Committee, this is the reading of the legislation 0110-21. It's a proposed Navajo Nation Council resolution assigned to the Budget and Finance Committee, thence Navajo Committee, thence Navajo Nation Council. 24th Navajo Nation Council, 3rd year 2021, introduced by Carl Slater, primary sponsor, co-sponsored by Seth Damon, council delegate. Tracking number 0110-21, an action relating to budget and finance, Navajo committees and Navajo Nation Council, establishing the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund and the expenditure authorization process thereunder, waiving certain provisions of the Navajo Nation Appropriations Act, amending 12 NNC Section 334 to authorize emergency procurements, authorizing reimbursement of an undesignated unreserved fund balance, authorizing central support and regulatory cost funding, authorizing funding to complete funded Navajo Nation CARES Fund expenditure plans, authorizing the establishment of the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Office within the Office of the President and Vice President. The legislation is 14 pages long, and there is a memo from the Office of Legislative Counsel and the Internet Public Review. Eugenio, that concludes the reading.
Commissioner, thank you for that reading. For this Shenandoah Budget and Finance Committee, is there a motion on this legislation? Is there a motion to accept legislation 110-21? Going once? Is there a motion? Going twice? Is there a motion? Committee members?
Vice Chair Smith, motions.
Going 3 times. Oh, Vice Chair Smith. Motion? Is there a second? Is there a second?
This is Delegate Brown. I'll second.
Delegate Nathaniel Brown, second. So we do have a motion by Vice Chair Smith and second by Delegate Nathaniel Brown. With this, Vice Chair Carl Slater, you have the floor to introduce your legislation to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Thank you very much, and to the committee membership, good morning. For those of you listening in who don't know me, Adona Nshonigi A Kiani, Sompana Bashichin, Najini Dashiche, Sompana Dashina, Carl Russell Slater Dashijine, Senakana Dansha. My name is Carl Slater. I'm Kiani, born for the Jewish people, and I represent 5 chapters in Northern Central Agency and serve on the Health Education Human Services Committee. Thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to present legislation 110-21. This legislation will accept the funding that has been appropriated to the Navajo Nation by the federal government under the American Rescue Plan Act Fiscal Recovery Fund. As you're aware, the nation received about $1.9 billion in a first tranche, and I'll provide some background for our citizens who are listening on the line. There are 2 tranches of funding that will be delivered to the nation. This first one, and that is based off of self-certified tribal enrollment data. The second amount is based off of tribal employment data. And I think the rules say that that will be coming out in August with a deliverable date of July 16th for submitting the employment data. So in all, people are estimating that the nation will receive about $2.5 billion in total, so maybe another $600 million based off of the employment data. The $1.9 billion is set up to respond to the coronavirus pandemic, and its purposes are similar to CARES, but broader in a certain sense. So this legislation will set up the protocols by which the council and the government can legislatively appropriate funding. And this committee will have a very important part in that protocol. If you go to page 5 of 14, section 4, that talks about the Fiscal Recovery Fund Expenditure Plan eligibility determinations and application requirements. So OMB, OOC, and DOJ are charged with developing an application review procedure that will include a template, and that has to be approved by the Budget and Finance Committee. And so that is the guidance that will be provided to Navajo Nation programs, to external, say, businesses or nonprofits or organizations, and they will have to abide by those application procedures in order to receive an affirmative consideration before the Office of Legislative Counsel will draft any legislations for appropriations. So that's particularly important for the next step if this legislation is adopted by the council, that the Budget and Finance Committee will need to provide their input and support that process. Going back a page, this legislation incorporates an aspect that Delegate Crotty sought under the CARES Act, and that was to have a public accountability tool or portal for our Diné people to observe the actions of the government with the ARPA FRF monies. So in section I, you see that charge to the controller's office to set up the accountability mechanism. And then in section H, you see the assurance that everything has to be spent according to the federal guidelines on ARPA. I think that's very important for assuring our people that this is a transparent process and their money will have performance measures tied to it. Moving forward, section 5 authorizes the reimbursement of the UUFB or general funds and CHISN funds for ARPA FRF eligible expenditures. And I think that that means they would have to be incurred after March 3rd, 2021. So it's not reimbursing the nation for projects that were funded by the CHISN fund that were incurred prior to that date. Rather, it's for the life of this legislation, the ARPA FRF, that will be reimbursed in that time period. So there are different estimates at this time, but it's charged to the Office of the Controller with OMB to make the appropriate determinations for the reimbursement of that. This means that we will then have citizen and general fund dollars freed up, and they'll be available for our usage according to those fund management plans. So I think that's a really important aspect and something that is generally agreed upon by both the Speaker's office, the council, and the executive branch. Section 6 covers appropriations that the nation made and the council made and that were signed into law by the president under the CARES Act. It says that we will immediately fund those and make sure that they are delivered. And that's legislation, or I should say programs and projects, particularly under CJOY 6720. So OMB, with the assistance of OOC, shall report the amount and status of such allocations to all of council, to the Navajo Committee, and to OPVP no later than 60 days after this legislation is potentially signed into law. Now, Section 7 is important for how ARPA FRF programs and projects will be delivered by the government. It sets up an ARPA office and makes an allocation to the executive branch and the Office of the President and Vice President for establishing the office and then coordinating those activities within the executive branch. This will be a sort of central support, nerve center, clearinghouse, however you would like to phrase it, to ensure that expenditures are consistent with the regulations and the laws of ARPA, and that the appropriate executive branch agencies are delivering programs and projects that are appropriated by the council. So this sets aside up to 10% for that purpose to set up this central support office. Now, Section 8 talks about how FRF funds, once a proposed idea is moved forward into a legislation, can be spent out of this fiscal relief fund. So in paragraph A on page 9 of 14. It adopts a 2/3 vote requirement for spending monies out of this fund. So if a program or project is to be viable and go to the president's desk, it will have to have a 2/3 vote of all members of the Navajo Nation Council. So we know that that would be 2/3 of 24, of course. It also identifies that the subrecipient agreements that a lot of us became familiar with under the CARES Act will be followed through. We need to make sure that there's accountability, and external organizations know that they're going to be liable for how they spend the money, and they have to comply with Navajo Nation laws and federal laws on the expenditure. And it identifies that a quote unquote responsible entity will have to report to NAVI and OPVP on or about 30 days after the end of each fiscal year quarter on the status of their projects. And they can also make recommendations to adjust the project parameters, or if there are compliance challenges, things of that nature. Section 9, since this sets up a new fund and a protocol for spending it, expresses waivers from the current fiscal appropriation process. Then Section 10 creates the actual section of the code that will cover this matter. Identifies that emergency procurement until a new procurement protocol is set in place may be used. And I would encourage this committee to consider procurement issues. And I think that it is fully within the committee's prerogative to introduce legislation that could clarify ARPA procurement. But this money has to be spent or encumbered by December 31st, 2024. And it's critical that we move forward as quickly as possible to get projects in the ground and to get programs to help our people out as quickly as possible. So in general, I think that these sections really favor Navajo businesses, and it's critical that we support them. In section C and D, you see some items related to that under section 10. Moving beyond that, on item E on page 13 of 14, it says, in order to support the purposes and intent of the Navajo Nation Business Opportunity Act and Navajo Nation Preference and Employment Act, then 50 days after the enactment of this legislation, the Navajo Nation Fiscal Relief Fund Office shall present a plan to the Budget and Finance and Navajo committees to provide bonding, insurance, and other needed to support to grow the Navajo Nation economy through private sector contracting using ARPA, Navajo Nation fiscal relief funds, and or other Navajo Nation or external funding. So as we've heard during the work sessions before the Navajo committee, there is a lack of bonding capacity among many of our contractors, and they're stuck in this catch-22, whereby they can obtain a contract or they can win a bid, but they can't execute the details of the contract because they don't have a signed contract, and so their insurance or bonding, agents won't provide them the financing for that until the contract's signed. You can't sign a contract until you actually have the finance components in place. So to the extent that the Navajo Nation, perhaps through the Nevada Chamber of Commerce and the CDFI in a joint effort, or maybe through our Insurance Services Department, can create insurance and bonding tools to help our entrepreneurs and small business owners, this legislation charges them to achieve that goal. Section D says OPVP and OOC shall only contract with qualified and experienced Navajo-owned enterprises, authorities, corporation, or Navajo-owned businesses, so that's Navajo citizens, not the government, to assist in the implementation, management, and monitoring of fiscal relief funds. So again, we're supporting the Navajo Nation economy by supporting our business owners. And the rest of the legislation is a savings clause in addition to some directives that are contained at the end related to hiring, to business regulatory, and then also to the rights of way process within the Navajo Nation. So, yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to present. And I noticed that there were two comments on the legislation, one from DED and the other from the Diné Chamber. So had some time to review them, and I think they're generally supportive, but also have some good points raised. I'll yield the time back to you, Chair.
Kashina Kadlasnanta, Vice Chair Slater. Though that, Shenandoah Budget and Finance Committee, are there any questions or comments regarding this legislation?
Oh, that's cute. That's awesome.
Hello?
Shenandoah Budget and Finance Committee? Hold on. I hear you, Shenandoah. Somebody please mute your phone if there's, if you can hear me. Please mute your phone. We can hear some background conversations. Shenandoah, you have the floor.
Terhinio, yeah, now that I don't get delegates later though. Okay. I know we're with the Budget and Finance Committee, Shenandoah, or invested with a lot of fundings regarding internal and external fundings. So these were established back in how many years ago by the Navajo people leadership and then vehicle. So any fundings that came before us in a bigger amount like CSC funds, so that's Edo, that Yaki, that were responsible to oversee that. By listening to a delegate, Slater, whatever the sounds is known regarding the I would question that on section 11, system authorizing the establishment of Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund office within the office of the President, Vice President Bakagi. I think I need more clarification on it. Has only get is it gonna be or will it be waiving or responsibility as a Navajo Nation Council Budget and Finance? What will be there? I think I need more clarification on it. I don't think that I think the other one is I think everybody I should think that this is something that as a Navajo Nation Council to discuss this before we could put in a expenditure plan. I don't know why we start running with the expenditure plan like this, and on our own, we always think that this is just for recognition and getting credit. Is the bottom line. If you're not sharing this ahead of time with the Budget and Finance Committee and coming in with something like this, it is up on this case in this call. The reason why I'm saying this is back then, 88 or the shutdown, there's usually a caucus coming in, people coming in and then talking about what do you think about it's going to be like this, it's going to be like this here. There are questions let's talk about it. That's how it was. I did the we changed it to 24 that I've seen, that people just coming without knowing, getting the legislation in place. I think the Abayetkia is still going through some discussion, and we do that. It's a citizen of Yahage, to work together the delegates, working with the community, what they need. They're talking about this this funding for everybody, make it known out there to where people, even the grassroots people, بتخلى أوتا بتستعمل جميع طبعا تسكت like right now we don't even have chapter meetings. We don't even have that much planning meetings. Just now beginning to have people coming back in. On this case, that this belongs to the people, the money. Or even now, everything. That's the reason why I had trouble with that part of it. That will be my question, and then also on the committee, I think how can we make this a legislation to where we can approve the hardship. I don't think that educate and that it will consult and thinking about projects that they educate. I don't know how can it be done, and how can there was a discussion between delegates and there was a discussion from the people that are eligible for that. And we have anticipated to the Julio. That'll be my question. Thank you.
Just hanging on for that question, Samantha. With that, back to Vice Chair Slater. You respond.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Schneider, Delegate Alderman Gay. So section 11, I guess we'll go to page 12 of 14, and I'll read from that section, and hopefully that will help make some clarification. So the OPVP is authorized to establish a temporary NNFRF office, that's Navajo Nation Fiscal Relief Office, within OPVP by executive order pursuant to the authorities listed there. Paragraph B, the office shall be a clearinghouse that will, at a minimum, educate the public on fiscal relief fund matters, coordinate, facilitate, and implement the fiscal relief fund responsibilities assigned to OPVP or the executive branch, ensure expeditious review of fiscal relief fund eligibility determinations and other fiscal relief fund matters by executive branch programs and offices, ensure Navajo Nation compliance with fiscal relief fund provisions of ARPA, Navajo Nation laws and regulations by all entities who receive fiscal relief fund funds, facilitate, expedite the expenditure of those funds, ensure the completion and implementation of fiscal relief fund authorized projects and services, and assist/support the Office of the Controller in monitoring the expenditure of fiscal relief funds and submitting timely and accurate ARPA reports to the federal government. Then, prior to the opening of the office, OPVP shall present a plan of operation or similar structural document for the fiscal relief fund offices to the Navajo Committee. And so at about 30 days after the end of each quarter, OPVP will present a report to the Navajo Committee on the overall fiscal relief fund office operations, accomplishments, and challenges, along with recommended modifications or adjustments to projects and processes. So this office is set up to help deliver and coordinate projects and essentially amplify the ability of the executive branch to expeditiously review, prepare for legislative appropriation, and then after such duly enacted legislations are signed into law by the president, deliver those programs and projects. That is the purpose of this office, and it will be funded with fiscal relief funds, but their operations will have to conform with the fiscal relief fund regulations and regulations, or statutes and regulations. So I hope that answers that question. And then with respect to this process, this is the legislative process. This is how legislation happens, and that hasn't changed at all since I've been a delegate. And I think it's been pretty similar for a good chunk of time. So this is how legislation moves forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Shanette, thank you for that response.
Anyway,
To Budget and Finance Committee, any further questions?
follow-up question.
Shanada, Elmer Gay.
Thank you for that. To the delegates later. So establishing the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Office. The criteria now is typical is that's the project, most of the project office are saying that and then they're clearing house for that alcohol and educate the public the car. So I believe that as being a delegate, that we listen to the people and we're here for the people. For myself, I have 5 chapters. I know their needs. I know where the people need where they need the water, where they need the electricity, and where I think they need the roads to be fixed. I know where the elderly are. I know who the name of the traditional names of the geological areas are. And I know their clans, what kind of people are from. So by that, I know my people. It's always that easy to know the people by clans and what kind of clans, where they're from, who the elders are there, where these people are from. So that's how I know these people need help. So nowhere in there does it say that the chapter will be submitting a plan, what their needs are. Where executive branch out of there, look at how they are seeing funds or living and expediting or projects. They're on the 5th year. I think just extending the projects. They're the main. I would say that they're the main bottleneck of all these projects. I don't know why we're giving them more of this authority for them again, authorizing them to be holding up the office. Okay, maybe I could do away with the Section 11. On this case, so I didn't hear anything about funded chapters and the people. Where the need is going to be, there's no chapter involvement, certified and non-certified chapters, I think. So it is, then I just keep it, give me a chair.
Chair Henio, this is Vice Chair Smith. I got a question. Thank you.
Vice Chair Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for sponsoring this legislation, Sui. This legislation has been pending. We do have 1.8 billion waiting to be spent, and that money is the way I understand it is for the American Recovery Plan Act related to the COVID-19. My questions are to Sui is. Under the page 8 of 14, letter B, can you explain what that actually means? And letter C, maybe Legislative Chief Counsel could explain those two in depth on what those meanings are on B and C, page 8 of 14. The other one is the emergency procurement under page 11 of 14B. Is this also going to be considered for the single source? Is that going to be where the chapters can utilize or any entity or any department or any persons or departments or whoever's getting the grant utilizing the emergency procurement, and it says no justification is required. I'm hoping that whoever's going to be doing this will ensure that there's no loopholes regarding. The reason why I say that is because one chapter will have an emergency, and then another neighboring chapter will have a different, almost the same type of emergency, but yet one chapter will be granted the ability to utilize that, and the other chapter will be like, how come I'm not? So there's always that fine line of misinterpretation on that for the single source and things like that. The other one is the Section 11 that Shada had spoke about. The Office of the President, OPVP, will be putting up a temporary Navajo Nation FRF office. Temporary means it's just for time being until all this money has been expended. Who's going to fund that money? Is that going to be taken out from the ARPA funds in order to have an office and to man those folks and to provide them benefits and salary? And it doesn't clarify that. It just says that there'll be a temporary office, or do they have separate funding for that? Could you elaborate a little bit on that, on how that's going to be put in place? Because that's going to be part of the legislation. And the other one is, the last one was, there's a whole underscore under item B of page 11 of 4. And within that, I'm wondering what does for this legislation. By looking at that, it says, notwithstanding any other provisions of law, procurement using the Navajo Nation fiscal recovery funds may be authorized and executed as emergency at the discretion of procuring party without further justification. I know there's always justification for this and that, even just the little bitty things of what's going on. But this language in here, it says no oversight committee approval shall be required for these contracts. So is this something that Navajo Nation is wanting to do on the Navajo Business Opportunity Act of 5 NNC subsection 201 that are able to complete the goods or service within the fiscal recovery strict deadlines shall receive preference in emergency procurement? Could that be explained on how this would benefit? Because that's new language in this, Shanada. Thank you, Chair Henia. Those are my questions. I appreciate the time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Vice Chair Smith. Back to Shanada, Vice Chair Slater. Questions posed by the Budget and Finance Committee, so you provide a response.
Thank you very much for the question, Chair. I'll try to get through all of them. So I think you started off with section C and D on 8 of 14. So that ties in, or that same section 7 ties into the question you asked about funding the ARPA office. If you see on paragraph A, so that'd be line 10, section 7 on that page, 8 of 14, the Navajo Nation hereby immediately allocates 10% of all fiscal recovery funds received by the Navajo Nation to fund central support and regulatory costs. So that ARPA office is going to be one of, I'd say, the primary center of central support and providing some of the regulatory aspects of overseeing the funding, and then also to assist with procurement, legal review, things of that nature. So that will contribute there. So you have 10% of the total, up to that can be used. And then 90% of it goes to the executive branch, and that will support that FRF office. And then 10% will come to the legislative branch. And if you consider our legal team, they need assistance in drafting or converting these expenditure plans into legislation. They'll need to review a lot of matters, and they'll need those resources on hand immediately. So from the compliance side and those actions that may need to be taken under the legislative branch, and then I'm imagining specifically for drafting legislations to support all of the requests that our delegates and our colleagues will have to support their communities, like Delegate Elmer Begay brought up. We'll need that support here in the legislative branch. So it'll be a 90-10 split among that 10% that is reserved to make this sort of central support. And that, I hope that answers your question on paragraphs C and D. Moving forward, you asked about the emergency procurement process, and that ties into the last point you made on the underscored section. So in that section, I think it's section 10. Yeah, section 10, we're amending 12N and C, which is the portion concerning fiscal matters in this section on procurement. And the paragraph that you read is being added into it. And it is saying that emergency procurement can be the de facto way of procuring under ARPA or using ARPA funds at this time. But the procuring entity, whether it's a chapter, an LGA certified chapter, or a Navajo Nation program, should still look toward competition as is practicable under the circumstances. And then to the extent possible, should still be using Navajo businesses that would qualify under the Business Opportunity Act to fulfill the services under or goods, or deliver the goods under the strict deadlines set in place. So the issue you identified, wherein one chapter could receive permission to move forward with an emergency procurement under one circumstance, and another with almost identical circumstances wouldn't be permitted, or maybe even the same chapter is procuring similar services or goods and they aren't able to move forward in an expeditious manner. The same thing for an internal Navajo Nation program that might receive inconsistent legal guidance based off of, well, who knows what. But this is set to clarify and streamline that so that until, say, the Budget and Finance Committee and the Navajo Nation Council adopts a separate procurement protocol that would be specific to ARPA, this will be the de facto law of the land to expedite and streamline. And this is set in place based off of the conversations between the legislative branch and the executive branch coming together and saying, how can we avoid procurement delays? This is the language that was mutually agreed upon and set up in this legislation. So that's its purpose and its intended outcome or desired outcome for its inclusion. With respect to Delegate Begay's questions about the people, et cetera, this is not really an expenditure plan legislation. So it's not saying, oh, we're going to appropriate money to this waterline project or to fund X service over here. Rather, it sets the protocols and the rules of the game for using these fiscal relief fund monies. And that's why if you read the legislation, it says that these expenditure plan templates and the application process under Section 4 will be developed. And so they're going to be developed, and then an entity can submit that under the protocol and process that this committee approves. And that could be, okay, it goes to the Fiscal Relief Fund office. They vet everything with the Department of Justice, an OMB and OOC. It's good to go. It's an eligible expense. Then you as a delegate, after you've moved that through the system, would take it to the Office of Legislative Counsel, and then they would convert that project or program into a legislation. So the power to appropriate still resides within the legislative branch. That's not given to anyone else. But for the purposes of making sure that a proposed project or plan, idea, concept is eligible under ARPA, it will need to move through, this fiscal relief fund application process as identified by your committee. So thank you. Oh, and then with respect to the Fiscal Relief Fund office and saying, well, why are we giving more money to the executive branch to deliver projects? The executive branch of a government is the portion of a government that is charged with delivering the programs and projects appropriated by the legislative branch. And one of the shortcomings of projects that have been funded under the Permanent Trust Fund and the Citizen Fund is that these sorts of central support costs that need to assist, a DCD or an NDOT or any program that may have received funding from those sources, or a division of natural resources, as you're familiar with, the Water Users Association and issues we've had over there. There wasn't a project manager. There wasn't an extra accountant. There wasn't, an extra contract analyst who was funded to oversee and deliver these programs when they were duly appropriated. And so that's been a real shortcoming in our government, is that the central support costs didn't have a commensurate increase to the volume of money and projects that were appropriated over the last couple of councils. And so in order to avoid that bottleneck, I personally believe it's important to fund those resources at the outset. And there isn't necessarily a perfect way of doing that that's incredibly scientific. And so that's why there's this 10% set aside and the 90-10 split thereafter. I think that's reasonable. It's almost less than half of, or almost half of what, I think I can't remember what it's called. It's not contract support costs, but it's the set aside that the government takes off of, an appropriation, an external grant to the nation for administering that grant. So this is less than that figure right there, right off the top. So I think that's smart that we're trying to be quick or use less resources to do that, but still make an appropriate funding to support the delivery of these programs and projects. So the responsibility will lie with delegates to advocate for their communities and get programs and projects in there. And then it will move through that vetting process. And once it's been vetted and approved there, it can go to the legislative process. And then, of course, I think I answered the question on the central support costs. So thank you very much, colleagues.
Again, thank you for that response and clarification on this legislation of Vice Chair Slater, as we all need to hear that this is not the expenditure plan. This is just legislation just to accept the money from the federal government. So can you keep that in mind, Shananta, Budget and Finance Committee. Any further questions or comments?
Chair Henry, this is Vice Chair Smith.
Vice Chair Smith, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chair Henry, and committee members of the Budget and Finance Committee and those that are listening, and also Shisui for eloquently articulating your legislation. I've got a couple more questions regarding the page 13 of 14 under the line of D, the OPVP shall contract with OOC regarding the funds. And that contracting, is that going to be consideration of who's best qualified, or how they're going to coordinate that? Because apparently this NNFRF office shall be a clearinghouse that will, at a minimum, educate the public, which is good. Public needs education on how to get funding for housing, electricity, water, roads, those things that they're asking us delegates at this point in time, when and where and how and all this. I know it's not an expenditure plan, but at the point in time when it does become an expenditure plan, when it becomes the time when these things are going to be put in place, this is just the framework, the foundation of this building, and we're starting to set the foundation for how this is going to be. But the question is, do we need to put in language in this saying that whoever is considered to facilitate by the language that's put in here, saying that they would have the ability to provide enterprises, our Navajo qualified people to kind of like Baker and Tilly in a way of looking at CARES money and augmenting. Would we need to put that language in there so that they can augment helping with OOC in behalf of getting these projects out and making sure that these projects are completed? Because we have up to 2026 that projects need to be all completed, and they need to be finalized to where the key is given to the owner and everything is done and the whole thing is complete by then. So that's one of the questions I have on that. And the other question I have too is maybe this goes out to OMB and OOC. This is a problem with the whole Navajo Nation as a whole. Every time we get funding, every time we get requests to start a project, there's always that hiccup, I guess you could say. There's always that speed bump. Oh, we don't have a business unit number. We haven't got the business unit number done. Well, whose responsibility is it? And then the finger starts pointing. Well, we're waiting on this and we're waiting on that. And they just keep going back and forth. Is that going to be a problem with this? Because we did the CARES money and there was a business unit number. And I'm hoping that this business unit number is not a factor on behalf of holding up projects and other projects throughout the Navajo Nation, that chapters always are saying, we don't even have a business unit number. And I think that should be also really looked at in order to make this thing go quickly. The other one too is page 14 of 14, item B, one-stop shop. I'm hoping that will become a reality, because I have a constituent sitting here next to me wanting to get a house, wanting to get his family a home. And I was telling him the procedures that are needed to get a home site lease. You have to go through this archaeological, you have to go through the grazing, you have to go through the grazing permit holders, you have to go through a lot of red tape. In order to get a home site lease, it takes not only months, it may even take years. And we need to get that taken care of so that folks that need homes can get their homes built in ample time before 2026. Because a lot of folks are looking at ARPA money saying, we need homes, we need a place to live, and we're crowded. Our families have come back and we're overcrowded, and I'm living in my vehicle and I don't have a home, I don't have a place. And am I considered homeless? Yes, you are. You're considered homeless if you're not if you don't have a shelter over your head. So these are the things that I'm really looking at, because they're tasked to do these things within a certain time frame, and I'm sure they'll be coming forth to BNF with each one of these directives on behalf of that. That's what I like to say on this behalf, Shananda. So I'm hoping OMB and OOC will not be holding up the business unit, and I'm wanted to present that. And thank you, Satsui, for bringing this legislation forth. I support this legislation, and I will support helping families, and I will support helping those that need homes, and those that need electricity, those that need water, those that need roads, those that need help out there in whatever manner to provide for this COVID-19 recovery, because the money's there and we need to get it expended. The last question is, are we going to look at the way we contract out and outsource? Because we're limited. NECA, IHS, NTUA, just to name a few. And with this whole amount of money, we're going to have to look out and outsource them. We need to amend that. So I'm hoping that that is one of the big priorities, so that we can get more contractors in, so that they can get the water lines going, that they can get the power lines going, that they can build houses, that they can build roads, just to name a few, on behalf of what this 1.8 billion is offering us. Shananda. Thank you, Chair Henu. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Smith, for that questions. Back to you, Shananda. Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you very much, Chair Henya. Mr. Chair, could you identify, I missed the first section. You asked about, I don't know which page it was, but, well, let me provide a response, then we'll see if that's adequate. So with respect to the business unit numbers, the idea of providing the central support costs at the outset is that we should be able to avoid these hiccups and delays by increasing the headcount. In my experience as a Navajo Nation employee and also as a delegate, it's that this current staff are too overwhelmed, and our system is not automated enough so that the human input and entry is required to a very high degree. So when you magnify that, if you say our annual fiscal year budget's about $170 million and about $1 billion with federal and state inputs or grants, this right here is 1.9 billion, which is way over than what we handle annually. So at the very least, setting up this 10% set aside to get those support services to OMB and OOC, so that they literally have the staff to enter things into the system to get those business unit numbers. That's the hope and the desire, and that's why we're trying to fund it at the outset to address your concern. With respect to the one-stop shop, I spoke with Chair Rick Nez yesterday, and the RDC, and he updated me on what RDC has been doing. I participated in some of their work sessions, but they've been meeting with the land department, the general land development department, to get this one-stop shop into legislation. And so I think there's a couple outstanding questions that they're still fine-tuning, and they're going to be meeting soon to address them. But once they fine-tune those items, he said he'll be sponsoring legislation to make that one-stop shop a reality. And it's precisely for the needs that you've identified. I think, with home site leases, it was my hope that we could offer a housing amendment to this legislation that would immediately say allocate about $200 million toward housing, because we know on the regulatory side, it takes a while for homes to get their home site leases. And then on the building side, it's going to take some time to actually construct homes and have the impact that we desire before either December 31st, 2024, or 2 years after that if the money's been encumbered. But I think at this point, because so many delegates have made immediate appropriation requests, that it will open the floodgates and we won't be able to get through this legislation today and tomorrow to have it for consideration at summer session. But I would urge the committee, if they want to make a comment in the committee report or something to that effect, saying that they support an immediate housing expenditure, that might go a long way in expediting that as perhaps the first expenditure plan that is moved through this process under your protocols and procedures that you would approve. So I am strongly supportive of housing, and I cannot underscore that enough, because it's explicitly allowable under the interim final rule. And, that's the regulations that are in place right now. And it says, and we know from our data that it was multi-generational homes and really dense living environments coupled, with the poor housing stock that we have on the nation that contributed significantly to the spread of the virus within our families and our communities. So this would be a direct public health response to that spread and would be eligible under ARPA. So thank you for raising that point. And then I think you asked about how the Fiscal Relief Fund Office is authorized to contract it. And of course, it's under the President's office, so we'll just say OPVP/the executive branch. For example, if an expenditure plan is passed for bathroom additions or cistern projects or well drilling projects, this is authorizing the executive branch to enter into those contracts with, say, a NECA or an NTUA to deliver the goals and objectives of those projects or the deliverables. So it's saying that you would go to NTUA and you would, do the power line extensions, do the sewer upgrades, get the broadband or get the copper to the home, those sorts of things. And then if it's with NECA, maybe, giving them funding for some other sort of construction project that needs to be delivered on behalf of our people. So I hope that clarifies your points. Thank you.
Chair Henry, a follow-up question, Vice Chair Smith.
Vice Chair Smith.
Thank you, Chair Henry. Thank you again, Sitsui, for answering those questions. I'm satisfied with the answers. And the one last question that I don't think you answered was, are we going to revamp the outsourcing of contractors? I know we're within that realm of utilizing NECA and NTUA and IHS and those entities, but are we going to amend so that we can open the doors for other contractors to come in and to provide services for the construction to ensure that we get these projects completed as stated with the ARPA laws, that we have to have it completed or encumbered and completed after the encumbrance 2026. 2024 is just right over the hill, and it'll be here before we know it. We're already in July, and we're going into August already, and time is just flying by. So these are the questions that I am looking at, and not only I am, but the community members. They're saying, well, when are we going to see this? As an example, Q84 down at Lupton, Halk. We've been waiting on that project. It's been fully funded, and I don't know why it's always put to the back burner, and I don't know why. This is not basically targeting you, Shache. It's just putting it out there saying, these are the reasons why I'm saying we need to contract outside so that folks can get water. This fund was appropriated to them back in 2015. Now it's 2021, and still nothing's been happening. Nothing has even been, not even one trench has been put in to this day. And now we're going to have a meeting with them the following week, and they just keep pushing it to the side, saying, oh, we're going to do it coming time. We're going to do it again. So that's why I'm bringing this concern up, Shenandoah. We need to contract out so that they will get these things done, get it completed. For an example, I want to use an example. I want to thank RDC. I want to thank Wilson Stewart, Councilman Wilson Stewart, for his endeavors to help me out. We contracted out. Contract was bidded out. The contractor went and started the bridge. He said, the contract said within 2 years that the bridge would be done. Now the contractor came back and he says, you know what? We're going to be done possibly August of this year, or maybe September. And I've seen the progress and I've seen the work done. That's the kind of contractors that we need to get these things done, completed, so that the projects can be turned over and the people can utilize it. That's why I'm making this a point, Shenandoah. Q84, I don't know what to say about it. I'm sick and tired of hearing it's going to be pushed and it's going to be pushed. I'm not the only one that's sick and tired of it. My people are. The folks that are waiting, they have bathroom additions, they have been waiting, and they've been told the money's been allocated, and COVID is not waiting on the prices because prices are going to escalate. I want to make this known. I want to put it on record. And thank you for letting me speak on this, Shenandoah Chair Henyu. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Smith, for those comments. Shenandoah. Back to Vice Chair Slater. I believe there was one question in there.
Thank you, Chair Henyo. Thank you for the clarifying points in the question, Chair. So with the procurement provisions that are put in here, it is set up to address a very, very serious issue. And I think, I don't know what divine twist of fate this is, but this morning it was announced that there's a $3.5 trillion Senate budget deal, I believe, for infrastructure and quote unquote human infrastructure. And a very real issue that both the Speaker's office and the President's office have been working on is the bonding capacity and the actual, say, construction capacity of the Navajo Nation. So if you add up all of our enterprises plus all of the small business owners, we may perhaps only have about $500 million worth of bonding and insurance capacity. So that means we as a nation with our existing source list cannot deliver more than $500 million worth of projects annually. And that includes previously appropriated programs and projects. Now, in order to address that fact, this emergency procurement provision was put in there and some of the other items in there. And additionally, the section directing the executive branch to come back with a plan to effectively increase the insurance and bonding capacity of the nation. Those are designed to address this issue. And the result is the delayed water line that you speak of. I don't know the particulars there. It sounds like it's an IHS project. When we talk about those central support costs, we didn't send any money over to IHS to increase their staffs. And I think in retrospect, the big miss was we should have just done this all internally instead of sending the money to the federal government who has their requirements and yada, yada, yada. So in order to avoid that this time around, we want to increase the bonding capacity, increase the insurance availability to our small business owners. And then if this Senate budget proposal passes, those outside contractors, so say every single one of our small business owners and our enterprises is working full bore to the brim, we would need to potentially seek non-Navajo firms if our firms can't increase their capacity. And because of the nation's present reputation on paying bills late and being a pain to work with, it may be very hard for us to get those outside contractors. And so I think everything that we can do from the outset to prove that we're on the ball, that we created the rules of the game that will maximize our efficiency, will prove to those folks outside of Navajo that we're really making progress and that they can do business with us confidently. Because they're going to have millions, if not billions of dollars for, of reasons to just stick with Winslow, Holbrook, Phoenix, St. George, Salt Lake City, Albuquerque, Gallup, Farmington, Durango, Denver. They're going to be fine getting rich over there because there's going to be plenty of work for them to complete with governments that pay the bills on time. So the issues you've identified we're trying to address them in this legislation. If you have ideas that may improve it, either at Navi or at full council, I encourage you to make those recommendations. But the presently agreed upon form of this that was introduced, or I should say is presently agreed upon, I believe, by the president's office or by the executive branch and the speaker's office, because they've had extensive discussions on these items. And the idea is to have those conversations, just like we had the work sessions, build off of that, meet with the program experts in the executive branch, and avoid any tit for tat or whatever the heck happened under the CARES Act. We want to avoid that and prove to our people that we're working here together hand in hand. Doesn't mean we'll always be eye to eye, but we'll know how to disagree with dignity. So I hope that answers your question and addresses the issues, but there still are some vulnerabilities, and that is just a fact if this massive infrastructure package passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Smith. Vice Chair Slater for your response. With this, Budget and Finance Committee, are there any further questions or comments?
Don't give a gay.
You have the floor.
Yeah, I'll just later. I know that oversee control under legislative branch. So with them, I know that with the my question is that OMB establish account numbers and business units, but who accepts those funds?
We can't hear Target Armor.
Thank you.
We could, you are cutting out very badly. We cannot hear you at all. Can you hear us? It's probably best you pull over because you're cutting in and out. We can hear you now, but then we might not hear you again later pretty soon here.
Okay, so let me stop here. Right now, we do. Let me call back later. Okay. We got here. Okay.
We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. So we know that OOC is under legislative branch called and OMB is under the executive branch called to set that funding. I know that OMB established business units and account numbers for, and they start doing the expenditure. But as far as we know, the OOC is the one that sets funding, and they establish the guidelines to go along with it. So they make sure that ensures that all these external funds guidelines are met before they could be given forward to OMB. That's the way we kind of see the process. So under this legislation, how is the legislative branch is going to be working with OOC? Even though if we're going to be establishing the ORPA office with the Ninigi. So that's one question. The other one is, I know that we say that we're not talking about expenditure plan, but we are. When we start talking about bathroom additions, and then it's going to come back down to contracting out. We're talking about the expenditure plan. So right now, my question is that we're very concerned that we should learn that we learned it from CARES Act is that with this bathroom additions and that, for example, for water line projects, for example, bathroom addition, NTA was given that contract, and they coded at $16,000 per bathroom addition. But when they subcontract out to our own contractors, Navajo Nation contractors, they were given $9,000 to establish to construct a bathroom addition. What happened to the $6,000? So we need to fix it. With this legislation, how can we those things will not happen to our own Navajo Nation contractors? That'd be my question. I know that we're going through an expenditure plan, but you guys are mentioning it. Slater's making Dr. Doug Slater's mentioned it, how it's going to go through once we get that money, and it goes to for bathroom addition, for example. We can go to NECA or NTA, then they can hire contractors, and that's what we're talking about it. So that's why I'm asking here. Thank you.
Here enough for that question. So with that, back to Vice Chair Slater. Nada, you have a response.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question, Elmer Rugay, Delegate Begay. So both OMB and OOC are executive branch programs. I think maybe you may have misspoke, but as you know, as a member of the Budget and Finance Committee, it's the controller which serves at the pleasure of the council. It's not the entire office of the controller. And likewise with the Office of Management Budget, that's an executive branch program. So when we have our quarterly reports, that's why the controller's report is not included under the legislative branch's report. The amount of funding, that 10% from the 90-10 split that's set aside that will come to the legislative branch, is supposed to augment our ability to, I would say, evaluate these proposals, ensure that they are delivered appropriately, and ensure that we as delegates can communicate with the appropriate executive branch agencies. So if there's a recommendation on how to improve that, I'm definitely all ears. But thus far, I haven't heard any proposals from yourself over the past few months on how to do that or how to achieve the goals you may be desiring. But if you have some ideas, there's still an opportunity to amend this legislation or, add in a subsequent legislation things that may help you there. So in terms of expenditure plans, this again doesn't have expenditure plans. I think there's an important difference that members of this committee should understand, since you have oversight over fiscal and procurement matters, that there are expenditure plans, and that's making an appropriation to a program or a project. And then there are procurement rules that address how goods or services that may need to be obtained from a program or an entity are obtained. And so those are two separate things, and they're treated as such, just like our accounting system is different than what our procurement system is under the Navajo Nation Code. So with respect to this issue that you seem to have with a particular contractor, I'm very uncomfortable having this conversation like this because there's the legal system that I don't know if it's been invoked in this matter or not, but it seems like we're talking about a very specific circumstance with a contractor that you know and trying to obtain some sort of redress for them before the entire council. If there's a policy matter, then I think we should look at this and send those policy, or I'd say recommendations, into law, either through this committee or through advisement to the executive branch and how they will perform procurement and ensure that contracts are abided by. But if this is about a contract dispute, then the Navajo Nation Council is not, I think in my opinion, I'll ask the Chief Legislative Council now to get involved, is not the appropriate venue to do this. So thank you. Ms. Bobroff, could you please weigh in on this matter about this contract dispute?
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater, for providing that response. And then also your comment upon Office of Legislative Counsel. So with that, Office of Legislative Counsel, as part of the response to the question.
Thank you, Chairman and Budget and Finance Committee. I think that Delegate Slater did a good response, and this is not the vehicle to address individual disputes. However, the way that this legislation is drafted is that for those CARES funds that were approved by council, but they got defunded because of rollover to the hardship assistance plan, or because they could not be completed as timely. Those allocations that were approved by council with CARES funds, they will be reinstated. So the issue that Delegate Begay is talking about is more of a issue that can be addressed when those funds are reinstated if this legislation passes. And it is a very specific question that probably there is a better framework than this legislation to address it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Barba, for helping us with that response. Back to the Budget and Finance Committee members. Are there any further questions or comments?
This is Vice Chair Smith, Chair Henny.
Vice Chair Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, committee members of the Budget and Finance, and also Chair Henio and sponsor of this legislation, Sui, Honorable Vice Chair Slater. And thank you, Legislative Chief Counsel, for explaining the defund. I guess the question would be later posed when we do start to fund the defund, will there be an amount of how much we're applying from this 1.9 billion to the defund? It's sad to say that it should have never happened. CARES money should have been utilized. CARES money should have been allocated, and we start off with a whole new amount of money for the dire needs of our people. And now we have to backstep and defund and fund the defund accordingly. So I don't know if OOC will have a figure then. I'm not asking for it now, but I appreciate the fact that Chief Legislative Counsel had brought that up, because that was one of the questions that was pending in the back of my mind. What do they mean by defund? What exactly is that? But that was explained, and I just want to bring that forth, Shananda. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Vice Chair Smith. With that, any further questions or comments, committee members? If not, I'll call for the question to accept the resolution 110-21. If there are no further questions or comments. With this, call for the question. Ramona, if you would lead us in a roll call vote.
Sure, Chairman, roll call vote for legislation number 0110-21. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? How do you vote? Crotty, how do you vote?
Yellowhair votes green.
Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Amber Kennisbot Crotty, how do you vote? How do you vote?
Ramona, excuse me, you're not coming through.
Amber Kennisbot Crotty, how do you vote? Kennisbot Crotty? Gay, how do you vote? Gay, how do you vote? Brown, how do you vote? Brown, how do you vote?
Excuse me, Ramona, you're not speaking into the mic. We're missing part of your.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, sorry. Honorable Amber Kennisbot Crotty, how do you vote? Crotty, how do you vote? Gay, how do you vote? Brown, how do you vote?
For some reason, we're not catching what you're saying. We couldn't hear anything that you said. I'm sorry for the.
I can hear you. This is Delegate Yellowhair. They should call in somehow. I was waiting to vote.
Peggy, could you take over on the roll call vote? It seems that we're losing Ramona here on the line.
Okay, you can all hear me, okay? Is that right?
Yes, yes.
We'll start over then. Vice Chair Smith, how do you vote?
Green.
Okay, thank you. And then Jimmy here, how do you vote?
Delegate Yellowhair, vote green.
Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. And then Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote? Going to Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Delegate Brown, how do you vote for legislation 110-21? Amber Knez-Crotty, how do you vote? We only have 2 members voting, Chair. That I heard.
Okay, thank you. It seems that we lost a quorum. We don't have a quorum at this time. Therefore, Ramon, are you still on the line with us? Can you? Yes.
And you have Nathaniel Brown is on the call still.
If they're not answering the roll call vote, that means they are not present. Ramona, are you still on the line with us?
Yes, I am. I'm using my phone, Chairman, to call in, so I got off of Zoom. I don't have any idea what's wrong with my laptop, so I am using my phone.
Okay, if you do roll call for us to establish a quorum, seems that we lost the quorum here.
Sure. Quorum for, roll call for the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation Council. Special meeting July 14th. Jamie Henyo.
I'm present.
Thank you. Honorable Jamie Henyo is present. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr.
Present.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. is present. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair.
Present. Part here at Crystal, so I can have signal. I don't want to lose quorum. That's why. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair is present. Honorable Elmer P. Begay.
I'm present.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay is present. Honorable Amber Knez-Crotty. Honorable Amber Knez-Crotty. Honorable Nathaniel Brown. Honorable Nathaniel Brown. Chairman, we have 4 members present entering upon roll call, 2 members not entering upon roll call, Chairman.
Okay, Shannon, thank you for that. We do have a quorum. So Peggy, if you would continue with the roll call vote, I believe you had 2 members already voting.
Okay, thank you. We have Yellowhair that have voted in favor of the legislation. Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
What are we voting on?
Legislation 110-21.
I'll vote red.
Okay, Delegate Begay has voted not in favor of the legislation. Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? And Amber.
Delegate Brown votes green.
Delegate Brown votes in favor of the legislation. Delegate Crotty, how do you vote? Delegate Crotty, how do you vote? No response. Chair, we have a vote of 3 in favor, 1 opposed for legislation number 04-21.
Good, Shannon, thank you for that roll call vote. We do have a do pass from the Budget and Finance Committee with a vote 3 in favor, 1 opposed on legislation 110-21. Otto, Vice Chair Slater, thank you for your presentation, and we'll forward this to Nabikia. Next, let's Vice Chair Slater. Do you have anything to add?
Just thank you very much, colleagues, for the opportunity to present. And if there are any questions that you have or ideas for improvement on this legislation or the whole process, I'm always game to speak with you. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. Next legislation. Vice Chair Smith. Vice Chair Smith, can you please take over the helm? Gavel. Discussion on that, Chair Henio.
Chair Henio. Hello.
Vice Chair Slater, Vice Chair Smith, you have the gavel. Thank you, Chair Henio. Next legislation on the new business. Could we have that read into the record, Peggy Shudda?
Members of the Budget and Finance Committee, the next legislation is 0105-21. And this is a proposed nomination council resolution. And it was considered by Resources and Development Committee, thence Budget and Finance Committee, thence Navigated Committee, thence Nomination Council. 24th Nomination Council, third year 2021, introduced by Jamie Henio, prime sponsor, tracking number 0105-21. An action relating to the Resources and Development, Budget and Finance and Navigated Committees, and to the Navajo Nation Council appropriating $529,850 in citizen funds to the Commission on Navajo Government Development for the Nahat-Hogan and Leadership Building, approving the Nahat-Hogan and Leadership Building expenditure plan pursuant to 12 NNC section 2501 through 2508. The legislation has the schematics and outline the design for the Hogan that is being proposed. The Internet Public Review document has 4 reports that were provided with comments, and then the Resources and Development Committee has a due pass with no amendments. Vote tally sheet from the Resources and Development Committee. That concludes the reading of legislation number 0105-21.
Shudda for reading the legislation into record for legislation 0105-21, sponsored by Chair Henio. Committee members, is there a motion?
All motion. Delegate Yellow here. Hello? Can you
I'll
hear me?
recognize you today on behalf of the motion. Do we have a second?
Chair. Short term chair.
Here's your second.
Recognize my motion? All right. I'm driving too hard. Speed up. I might have lose signal somewhere.
I should say, recommend that you park because we need to keep a quorum here.
Okay.
So we're done.
I'll park somewhere right here again. I'll park right
Okay.
here.
Motion,
Okay.
Your motion is recognized. Need a second for legislation 105-21.
This is Delegate Brown. I'll second.
I'll recognize Delegate Brown's second on this behalf, and we have Chair Henio. Chair Henio, you have the floor. Thank you, Shinada. Vice Chair Smith. Can you hear me here? I get muted. Crystal clear. Diga, Shinada. Vice Chair Smith, adoption of Budget and Finance Committee. Kodoya legislation 105-21. Kabande Tihige Ayako. The Sozaho. Banacha Dida. Peso. $529,850. $50,000. But I thought this all. Decon I wanted to leave and yet quite a base on the Sozaho. Just the Nahata Hogan and Leadership Building, just Belgium. Though for the Navajo Nation government, then yeah. Even at the Navajo Government Development, Office of Navajo Government Development, and the Commission on Navajo Government Development. I could die in the ha. The way I take the Kushinaha, Katinaha, but I could say Lehoyana, Yayatastio, Ado Commission to Abe his Ani, Ado A Haskins, Abe Stone Cocorda. Resolution from the Commission on Navajo Government Development. Ado Vinacha Decoy Justina at Hegi. Ado Coy one bus Ado no. Baby Behodi Star Conley, Anguled, Queen Hayadam. Ado Vinacha Decon. Joya at call on Winter Rocky, Saka Hotsanigi. In Khaz Ani, Ado Benago. Did once Anagi at them. I see the museum there, how one numbers and the yard of non even yet. I do over the Ghana, he's not hot Jaha. Either this, either the Ishkado, Jada even was but here and here, Anigito con here. Hit Kodo, but other Bidona had at Eggy. I love an Jaya con the Quigoshi did a house on each one equal. So the Zenbido at the Itzi. Ado did the Koya, the Quigoshi at the old Ishigi. Now that Hegi. Say that Hegi could a bassa Ado. A call at a Danish, so Ado Nacho, what do you have this arm? Chakiyaki, Pashido, Ehlodotni. So Sahagi lay Veterans Park and he laid Speaker's Office, so Office of the President. The Nas Agi, Quagi Kayagi said, Halogi, no. A coda deceit, yet how this and in the I thought a Dobiga Tabatoni, I thought a ad a yet. Sahata even Nahat Akayagi, so Dobiga Tabatoni. Adonasnana, they lay. The Office of Government Development, Office of Administration 1. Abetragi Kia Anahasta no. Joe Quaggy Nanil Ado Office of Navajo Land Department, Land Administration. Any Kaiji or Kuna about almost 2 acres that's okay now the Tande. The Anaso by Yana to a Quaggy, the Yashon, the Nahoto, Nito Bigata. In late 1989, that the whole tea there, the Kashita Hanso, Shaki up the Hotito on now. The Bigata Hoto, the eco. So I had also not Honana Yako. The Anaso, not alcohol. They lay Law and Order Committee building. The nature. Shut the Acho. The Aquagi. The Office of Government Development Acho. Aquagi Kaya, non could Yanani Inco. The Navajo Land Administration. And he cannot be not jail. J. R. The Kayagi. But not so, yeah. The Uncle. So Koe Kadesi Street, they are the Benatako. Then leave Law and Order Committee building manager. A Quagisha Yako, Dideba, Pahuito Asato Nico. So even at a Quagi A Kayagi Nature, a show. Hatiliako. adult administrative withdrawal or yeah, Navajo administration the lako. Adam na chikadeya di de khalit ando tasa. Ado khalit ya sa ando lati de kin hawana masato kin biga nanas aniki. So kaiki Navajo Division of Community Development. Joy Adam Tato da initiate Community Project Management Division CPMD de. Give a quite kai chief about the non show that you got other project managers are creature on Shahalo, that we got the link. So even that and they NECA, Navajo Engineering Construction Authority. They the he be got the dini, Nika jail, we got could up. And so the Kaya because I give Kai one. Namazin dot Aslido can Tabiga Hana dot Asli, Ebi and Kaijiho. At I could a Nash town hard or least. I don't that they call a creeper or Lehigi, cost estimate digital, Naha de Lia Benica. Edo could have been Kaiji, but we don't need a ho. So at I could at Kaiji, the Olia, can't chaho. So a county exhibits that Eggy. Not so that's Togi schematics with legislation this Togi. Jay could not neck again, Kaiji. I even that Jay Yakoi Yak and Inko. All that once the other now. No, a shake could ocean and it other not in the Oko. Even that Jay Kadea could a Pahosen. Halit and dot Aslak, Kay Hagi, I thought in a corner. On the diagrams, I don't the when the mosquito can be has anigi, Hanod Lendo Lahun so. Jota that's Chalco, if it's Toco. I don't the even that base about or Lishigi, how they learn about or Lishigi to hold the AI star, Canada or Yako. So even that Yako, Dick at this thing they could do, Shinanta Budget Finance Committee. Kodoni ni ka dot chanson. Ha wanted to use unhid here and ni not I given that chan. Could be legislative branch, other office of the executive branch, president, vice president. Could I exchange a cousin so she 3 branch chief agreement no be hard but had the shake in the less quality in the Hina Iltawana, I could never pay about window. I don't need a telephone, even that she a Hina Ilte. But had it either Lakodoin, I once out. The doesn't have not only in the house pound the out for her name. At least Prado, I even that I can see pound doesn't abandon out of you. I say, hey, Jonathan. Ado kodo eti kuigo shi ya kodo the kana khan taka. I needed by President Joe Biden, nani inigi Dr. Biden haniya. Was di that na ha iltiha kunebli haji crowd di kude on and hatate. But did no then on although the wait is ria Jonito. So even that I called Nasavan Sahik so called it either not Egi for the next leadership coming in next year election will not be day. So I have one bundle I don't enough to go into Hoi Aho. But I have one Sahik so 80 could in Besogi. It's a thought either what I this onion so the call. So even that I call agent, Dr. Edward D. I have to hold Director Edward D. from Office of Navajo Government Development. East Falco. I don't know Boo Nigrin from Navajo Engineering Construction Authority though. For any questions coming up. Day Yakudo for responses. They say, "Ajo ay but ish aspect." Kade also to my presentation. Ado kade budget and finance committee with the window J on Jonathan. Jonathan, Vice Chair Smith. Negotiation on that, the legislation, you dying so zi. Kade committee members on the Senegi, Naidi Kirstalo.
Got a pro temp chair too. This is Delegate Yellow here. The
Oh, Jean-Louis.
Share, this
go ahead, speak.
Is very good for the planning. Not a whole gun. Virginia, not any Eliago, not on there. Share other. So, could you be something cut off? Yet, extra never gonna have no on there. It's a good plan to approve this $529,000. It's very worth it for us. We not only this Congo, we can be hot at every day. Never not India. Should I need to this my vote is green for this legislation. Thank you, as to pro temp chair. Thank you for this legislation too, Mr. Henio, Chair. Once about
Agustus check na o behind the do na che na idikit bisalada. Kare committee members on the Senegi na idikit sholo. So to eat ada Shanella Ashwoda, call for the question. Round the horn.
Sure, Vice Chairman. Roll call vote for legislation number 0105-21. Honorable Jamie Henio, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Jamie Henio votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth Marcrotti, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth Marcrotti. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Vice Chair, we only have 2 members voting for the legislation and 3 members not voting, with the Vice Chair not voting. Vice Chair?
Next in line would be to do a roll call for quorum and see if we have a quorum. Bon, it's Chanela, go around the floor. You got the floor to do the roll call. Chanela, are you there?
I'm sorry. Honorable Jamie Henio?
Present.
Thank you. Roll call for the Budget and Finance Committee, July 14, 2021. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr.?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. is present. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair?
I'm present here.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair is present. Honorable Elmer P. Begay? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, Honorable Amber Kenneth Crotty, Honorable Amber Kenneth Crotty, Honorable Nathaniel Brown, Honorable Nathaniel Brown. Vice Chair, we have 3 members entering upon roll call, 3 members not entering. Roll call, Vice Chair.
Thank you for that roll call. At 12:28, I'll call the meeting to closure due to no quorum. Meeting is now closed at 12:28. Ahead now, also.
Thank you, Vice Chair Smith, for taking the helm here.
Tagoshi, we're done. So go by your other
Thank you, everybody, for attending and participating in the Budget and Finance Committee special meeting today. We have a lots of quorum, and so the meeting is adjourned.
Peggy.
Yes.
When will the committee report be ready for 11021?
It's ready now.
Okay, I'm gonna start making my way into Winter Rock then.
Thank you.
Also, hold on. Also, will this move on to Navajo since we acted? There was a motion in a second, but there was no.
No, there's no vote on it, so it has to have a vote. And so our next meeting.
Okay.
3rd, 2021.
Okay, I'll start making my way to Winter Rock then.
All right. Thank you, Chair. We'll talk to everyone.